If you grew up in Canada in the 1960s, you can probably still smell the pine sap on your mittens. Christmas didn't start in November back then, and it didn't need fancy lights to feel bright. It was a season of waiting and wonder, when the first snowfall felt like magic, and the sound of a kettle on the stove meant warmth was on the way. Kids counted down the days with pencil marks on the calendar, wishing time would hurry up, though half the joy came from the waiting itself. For most families, Christmas began with one thing: the Eaton's catalog. Every autumn it arrived in the mail like a golden ticket. Mothers flipped through housewares, fathers checked the tools, and kids went straight to the toy pages. Dolls with real lashes, electric trains, and chemistry sets filled those glossy spreads. Each child had their own system. A folded corner meant want, a circle meant need, and a star beside it meant Santa, please. The catalog stayed on the coffee table until its spine cracked, proof of hundreds of small dreams made in pencil. Then came the trip to see Santa, not at a mall, but inside a proper department store. Woolworths, Eaton's, or Simpson's turned their upper floors into wonderlands of fake snow and glowing reindeer. The air smelled of pine, cigarette smoke, and perfume. Parents stood in wool coats while kids rehearsed their lines as the queue crept forward. Santa sat on a creaky throne under blinking lights, and every child swore it was the real one. They left with sticky fingers from striped candy canes and cheeks red from excitement, not the cold. At home, decorations came from kitchen tables, not dollar shops. Families made paper chains and popcorn garlands together. Mom threaded the needle, Dad held the string, and the kids fought over who got to pop the next kernel. It wasn't just crafting, it was togetherness. The radio hummed "Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree" while the room filled with the smell of butter and glue. Some families even cut shapes from cereal boxes and wrapped them in shiny foil saved from chocolate bars. When the tree finally went up, it stood proudly, even if half the bulbs refused to light. No one cared about symmetry. The goal was sparkle. Most homes still chose real firs or spruces. You could smell the forest every time you walked into the room. Some trees leaned, some dropped needles early, but once the lights dimmed and that tree glowed, even the plainest living room looked enchanted. Evenings belonged to the television, the kind with dials and rabbit ear antennas that always needed adjusting. Families gathered to watch CBC Christmas specials, Wayne and Schuster, Tommy Hunter, Sing-Along Jubilee. For an hour the whole country seemed to pause, all watching the same flickering screen. If the record player came out afterward, Bing Crosby or Nat King Cole would fill the room until the needle hissed into silence. Then only laughter and the hum of the furnace remained. December also meant bundling up for the Santa Claus parade. Whether you lived in Toronto, Winnipeg, or Vancouver, the magic was the same. Marching bands, clowns, and floats that seemed 10 feet tall to a child's eyes. Parents clutched thermoses of coffee or cocoa while kids waved their mittened hands until Santa's sleigh appeared. Once home, noses pink from the cold, there was usually stew on the stove and the smell of something sweet in the oven. That's what the holidays were, warmth against winter. The next morning, with snow piled high, the outdoors turned into a playground. Every Canadian child remembers building snow forts and icy slides in the yard. They used tin toboggans, wooden sleds, even flattened cardboard boxes to race down the nearest hill. Boots leaked, fingers froze, but no one wanted to stop. Their laughter carried across quiet suburban streets and frozen fields alike. When they finally came inside, Mom handed out hot cocoa made with real milk, and the windows fogged so thick you couldn't see the storm outside anymore. And hanging on the wall was the Advent calendar, a small doorway into Christmas magic. Behind each numbered flap waited a chocolate or picture. Bells, angels, snowflakes. Siblings argued over whose turn it was. Some families even reused the same cardboard calendar year after year, carefully taping the doors shut again for next December. That was Christmas in Canada in the 1960s, handmade, homegrown, and full of heart. No advertisement could sell what families already had. Time together, imagination, and a kind of warmth that rose from the hum of the furnace beneath the sound of laughter. The week before Christmas, every Canadian kitchen turned into a sugar-scented factory. By then, the snow outside had settled thick, and the house smelled like butter, spice, and brown sugar. Mothers guarded their recipes like treasure while kids helped where they could, rolling dough with clumsy hands or sneaking spoonfuls of batter when no one was looking. The counter was dusted white with flour, and the air felt heavy with the smell of something good coming from the oven. The real stars of those kitchens were butter tarts and Nanaimo bars. Every province had its own twist. In Ontario, the butter tarts oozed with syrup that dripped down your fingers. Out west, the coconut and custard layers of Nanaimo bars were set to cool on the porch, hardened by the winter air. Date squares, shortbread, and maple fudge filled every tin. Each batch was for company, but half of it vanished before Christmas Eve. Kids called it taste testing, though every tray seemed to have one neat bite missing. The house never felt more alive. Radios played Bing Crosby and Anne Murray. Mum hummed along to Silver Bells while wiping her hands on her apron. Somewhere in the background, the furnace turned on with a deep, familiar sigh, the sound of comfort in Canadian winters. Evenings brought out the wool stockings hung carefully by the furnace or on the backs of chairs. Since many homes didn't have fireplaces, they weren't store-bought or themed. One belonged to Dad, one to Mom, and a smaller one for each child, stretched and faded from years of use. Inside went simple treasures, a tangerine, a few nuts, maybe a handful of chocolate coins wrapped in gold foil. The faint smell of oil from the furnace mixed with pine needles and oranges. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough to keep kids awake, staring at those stockings and imagining what Santa might add. When the baking was done and the stockings were ready, the music began. Most homes had a record player, often built right into a wooden cabinet that doubled as furniture. The lid creaked open, the vinyl slipped into place, and then came that soft, familiar crackle before the first note played. Bing Crosby's voice drifted through living rooms from Vancouver to Halifax, joined by Nat King Cole, Perry Como, and later Anne Murray. Parents might dance slowly by the tree while kids slid across the carpet in their socks, pretending to skate. The needle sometimes skipped in the same spot every year, and that little skip somehow became part of the song. Before bed came the quiet moment every child waited for, writing letters to Santa. They wrote them carefully in pencil on lined paper, letters full of hope and crooked handwriting. Dear Santa, I've been good. Please bring a doll for my sister and a sled for me. Parents helped address the envelopes to Santa Claus, North Pole, and walked them to the mailbox under falling snow. Back then, Canada Post hadn't yet created the official H0H0H0 system, but some local postmasters and volunteers still wrote replies. Sometimes a child would wake to find an envelope under their pillow, signed in careful handwriting, "Love, Santa." Parents often kept those letters tucked away in drawers for decades, folded, yellowed, but never thrown out. They were proof of something precious, a time when their children believed without a single doubt. Then came Christmas Eve, the quietest night of the year. Snow glowed under streetlights, radios whispered carols, and church bells rang faintly in the distance. Children pressed their noses to frosted windows, searching the night sky for sleigh bells or reindeer shadows. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. Even the furnace hummed more softly, as if it knew what was coming. And then morning. The world outside was white and still. Inside, the first sound was the rustle of wrapping paper. Frosted windows and coffee cups marked the start of every Canadian Christmas morning. Parents shuffled in wearing slippers, and the tree lights flickered gently while kids waited, not sure if they were allowed to touch anything yet. There were no mountains of boxes, just a few gifts that truly mattered. A new doll, a toy truck, maybe a sled that would see its first hill before breakfast. The kitchen smelled of bacon toast and pine. Radios played Silent Night under the soft crackle of the morning news. And if you listen close, you can still remember it, that quiet, content sound of a family just being together. By afternoon, the rush faded into peace. Snow forts waited outside, but inside there were puzzles, books, and maybe one more square of Nanaimo bar to sneak when no one was watching. Some families visited neighbors, others just sat by the window, watching flakes fall and wishing the day could last a little longer. That was Christmas in 1960s Canada, homemade, heartfelt, and built from small moments. It wasn't about what waited under the tree, but about what filled the air, the smell of butter tarts cooling by the window, the soft crackle of a record, the tick of the clock, and the hum of the furnace beneath the sound of laughter. By Christmas night, the excitement had softened into warmth. The wrapping paper was folded neatly, the toys were tested and proudly shown off, and the record player had slowed to quieter songs. Outside, snow still drifted down in heavy flakes, but inside, the house felt peaceful, the kind of calm that only follows laughter and full bellies. Families lingered at the table long after dessert, nibbling on leftover shortbread and butter tarts. The kettle whistled for one more cup of tea. Parents swapped stories, uncles dozed in armchairs, and kids lay on the carpet surrounded by board games and toy soldiers. The tree lights flickered across the walls, and for a little while it felt like time itself had paused. The next morning came gently, Boxing Day, a holiday that still belonged to visiting, not shopping. In the 1960s, it was a day for family, neighbors, and second helpings. After breakfast, families bundled into cars or buses, carrying tins of cookies and turkey sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Roads were quiet except for the crunch of tires on snow and the laughter that came from the back seat. Every house smelled different, roasted meat, coffee, or just clean winter air. At each stop, there'd be another cup of tea, more butter tarts, and someone saying, "You didn't need to bring anything." Kids compared gifts with their cousins, traded chocolate coins, and played until their mittens were soaked through and their cheeks glowed red. Back home, the afternoon belonged to games and puzzles. Families huddled around the kitchen table for Scrabble or cards, the radio humming softly in the background. Someone always bent the rules, someone always laughed too loudly, and someone always spilled their drink. It didn't matter. These were the moments that glued families together, simple, small, unforgettable. Outside, the neighborhood was alive with sleds and snowmen. Children flew down icy hills on wooden toboggans or flattened cardboard boxes, while dogs chased snowballs that disappeared as soon as they landed. Parents called from doorsteps when the lights started to fade, and kids pretended not to hear just to stay out a few minutes longer. As evening fell, lights twinkled across small towns and city streets alike. Radios switched from carols to gentle songs about home and love. Dinner was humble: turkey soup, warm rolls, maybe a plate of cold ham. The fine dishes were packed away, replaced by everyday plates again. The celebration was over, but the glow of it still lingered. Later in the week came small rituals, thank you notes, mailed cards, or quiet evenings with books. The scent of pine still floated through the house, and the tree stayed up a little longer than planned. Kids tried on new mittens and promised to use their new sleds tomorrow, though tomorrow always came too fast. And when New Year's approached, it arrived quietly. Decorations stayed lit for a few more nights, The record player rested beside a small stack of worn Christmas albums. The living room still looked festive, but the excitement had turned into something gentler, gratitude and reflection. If you looked out across any Canadian street that winter, you'd see the same thing: footprints in the snow, the faint glow of a living room window, and smoke curling from chimneys. Every family was different, but the feeling was the same: a shared heartbeat across the country, steady and warm beneath the cold. That was Christmas in 1960s Canada, not about what you could buy, but what stayed with you after the tree came down, the sound of the furnace kicking in, the warmth of cocoa after a snowball fight, the soft buzz of a record spinning one last time before bed. Every child carried those moments into adulthood: the smell of pine and oranges, the glow of Christmas lights through frosted glass, and the comfort of knowing that for a little while each year, the whole country felt like home. And when the snow falls even now, those memories come back, quiet, bright, and beautifully Canadian.